Welcome to Five Clubs. I am Jay Bilas of ESPN, and I'm so excited to join Five Clubs for a conversation, a podcast each month about golf, a sport that I'm really passionate about. I have loved golf for my whole adult life, and I can't even explain how much I enjoy it, even though as crappy of a golfer as I am. And what this podcast is going to be is just me talking with other people who share a passion for the game, like I do. I don't know where these conversations are going to go, but I know we're going to enjoy talking to some great people about one of the greatest games ever invented. Golf is not quite basketball, but it's pretty damn close, and that shows you how much I appreciate the game. But today we're going to talk with a friend and a guy I've had the opportunity to play with a few times, and that's Andy Roddick, the great tennis champion. He won the 2003 U.S. Open. He's a five-time Grand Slam finalist and a member of the International Tennis Hall of Fame. And I can tell you from experience, you're not going to find a better guy than Andy Roddick. I met him through golf. We are actually members of at a couple of the same clubs. And after having played golf with him a few times, I just marveled, one, at how he hits the golf ball, because he mashes it. And you can see some of the tennis in his golf, but you can also see he's got amazing hands that no matter what happens in the backswing or after he makes contact, at the point of contact with the golf ball, it is impeccable, just crazy good. And the other part is just how much fun he is to be around and what a normal guy he is. For a guy with extraordinary ability to fit in with all of us normal folk as well as he does. You would never know who Andy Roddick was if you didn't already know who Andy Roddick was. And that's to me, that's pretty cool. So hope you enjoyed this conversation with the great Andy Roddick. Well, Andy, thank you for joining us on this Five Clubs conversation. And I've had a chance to play golf with you a couple times and get to know you a little bit. And you seem to love golf as much as I do. When did you start playing?
In earnest, Jay, thanks for having me. This is awesome. Probably in earnest, maybe a year before I retired from tennis. So it was probably like 2011. But then it was maybe a little bit before, but it's not something I kind of played my whole life or anything. But I played a little bit, but I would go on tour. So I wouldn't play for 3 months. I'd come home and play for a couple of days. And then when I stopped playing, I was a good, for 2 years, I was probably a good 5-day-a-week guy. Like it was an obsession. And I actually had time for the first time in a long time. And so got hooked, and I just love it. I mean, I honestly think it made me leaving the sport a lot easier, especially from kind of the social side. It filled a lot of the void of the locker room and being around the guys, and you kind of just find a different hobby and some different guys to play with. So I think it provided a little bit of a soft landing for me out of tennis.
So when you were growing up, did any of your family or close friends play golf at all?
No, I remember my brother would play a little bit, and there was like a dinky par 3 that we'd go to like sometimes. I might have played like probably 6 times when I was a kid, but not really. My brother, who was older than me by 6 years, was a tennis player, also played at Georgia. And so I was kind of always around that. So it was pretty tennis dominant. But I've certainly tried to make up for lost time.
Your family seems like it was tennis dominant, as you put it. Was that a country club tennis, or was it club? How did that work?
No, it was. I guess it was. It wasn't really country club tennis. I remember I took my first lesson at a public tennis facility in Austin, Texas, called Caswell Tennis Center, just off the UT campus, and we belonged to a little tennis club, but it wasn't a full-blown country club. But I used to go down to Caswell, and my mom would drop me off in the mornings, And then I would basically be on call for games, right? And so you play someone for $5 here, $10 there, lunch there, and that was like when I was like 8, 9 years old. And so I knew if I could win lunch off of someone, that I could pocket the lunch money that my parents gave me. And so I would try. The goal every day was to try to double dip.
So did you play other sports growing up, or was it just tennis?
Yeah, no, I played. I played baseball. I played a little bit of soccer. We moved to Florida when I was 11 from Texas, and it was for my brother's tennis because he was on the junior national team and kind of at that point had pro aspirations. So once we moved there, frankly, it was just easier to go to one place with both of us. So I started playing tennis a lot more seriously, and then became the top ranked junior in the world in the country pretty shortly after that. And then it was kind of the next kind of 6 or 7 years before I was on the tour was a little bit of a blur. You're doing 6, 7, 8 hour days on court. And so it was pretty focused from 11 on, but before that, I kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything.
Where did the focus come from? Were you told, hey, you need to do this and really devote yourself to it, or was it something that you loved and wanted to do yourself?
Probably a little bit of both. Kids are kind of similar to adults. We like to do what we're good at a lot of the times. And I was really good at tennis, and I would go and you win a tournament, and so therefore you like it. Did I want to do it 6 hours a day every day? Probably not. You'd rather go like fishing with your buddies. But my dad, it was from a military background, so his whole thing was like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you do choose to do something, you should fully commit. And so I think it was a little bit there. And I've always, even when I was a pro, I kind of always had this insecurity if there's someone out there. I guess on the pro tour, who the people out there are, but I always had this like insecurity that there was some kid in France somewhere that was working harder or doing something better. And so I think insecurity drove a lot of it.
Tennis seems to require a certain level of intensity and concentration that maybe a lot of other sports don't require. And how intense and concentrated were you as a player? And I'm asking you that with the idea of how did that transfer to golf, and does it help you or hurt you at times in playing golf?
I think I was it's weird. The more distance I get from tennis, the weirder that I can kind of see that it is, right? Not having, like, we just, I'm not sure when this will air, but we just finished watching Rafa win his 21st slam, and 5 hours and 40 minutes where you can't talk to another human, right? It's very isolating, and it's almost like two gladiators going into a ring, minus physical violence, right? But this, to see those guys, watching it now, seeing those guys both dragging through the last 2.5 hours, not even fist pumping because they're so exhausted, and that's before we get to kind of mental fatigue. Tennis is a hard sport. It's extremely isolating, and people are now starting to talk about kind of the mental baggage that might come with it. I guess for me, because I was always in it, it just felt normal. And so you kind of suppress a lot of those things and don't really give it too much of a thought. But, now looking back, I realize it's not normal for an 18-year-old to travel for 45 weeks a year and kind of be alone without a team. But at the time, it was just kind of what you did.
What would you do in practice? Like, was your coach, were you one that was messing with your swing all the time? Your tennis swing or your tennis mechanics, kind of like golfers do, or was your coach more a strategic mental coach for you?
Different times. So when you're young, you obviously have to be a little bit more technique focused. There was a great coach out of Florida named Rick Macy, whose name is on the top of a lot of people's minds now because he was one of the characters in King Richard, the story of Venus and Serena and Richard Williams. I was there at the same time as they were. And for my money, there's not a better technical coach. But instead of being, saying you have to be at certain places you're playing, everyone was a little bit different. And his big thing was, I'm less concerned with how you do it if you can repeat it under pressure, right? Like, thank God no one changed Rafa's swing where he's actually finishing on the opposite side of his body half the time. So you could have perfect technique, and if you can't execute it under pressure, it doesn't really matter that it looks pretty. His thing was, let's find something that you can go to and kind of deliver time after time, no matter the score line. And I think that's lost largely in golf sometimes. And in tennis, we get so in our own heads that it has to look a certain way, or we're not just happy with the predictable ball flight. We want to be able to hit it the other way too. And so I think in both sports, there's probably a value in simplicity that we get away from sometimes.
Well, speaking of that, do you mess with your swing a lot, or do you go more by feel?
Both. I mess with my swing by feel, and it's like the problem with me in golf is that I've never had a lesson. So when it's fine, I go by feel a lot. Like it's, if I want to hit a cut, I kind of just make a cut swing and something feels right and it kind of happens, and with the draw. But the problem is when it goes sideways, I don't know enough about the sport to actually go through the processes of fixing it. In tennis, I had the ability to, I was always going to serve big. I could put balls in play and run around for a while, at least, kind of using scoreboard pressure to kind of try to get through it. Golf, if it goes sideways, I don't have the ability to just simply find fairways and play a little bit more conservatively. And I think that's the difference. Just I don't have the fix mechanism in golf.
I'm surprised that you've never had a lesson. So the whole thing's self-taught, and you brought sort of your knowledge and hands and all that stuff and your tennis swing into golf. And that's amazing. You've never had any help and you're this good.
No, well, I'm only good enough to know that I'm not very good. But I think you make adjustments along the way. I think, both of us have had the opportunity to play with some like really good players. And so you kind of learn by watching. Right. And, if someone mentions something about a grip, like this looks, you're doing something the wrong way, you kind of take that into consideration, if you value the source. So, you get tips along the way, and people see different things, and you see someone go down in the bunker and lean forward on the left leg while cranking back. You're like, okay, well, that comes out a lot cleaner than mine. Maybe you just try to imitate that. So, I think you can learn by watching, but I wasn't one in tennis who could think of 5 things simultaneously on a backhand side. Jimmy Connors was one of my coaches, and my backhand was horrendous, but it got less horrendous later in my career. He goes, just relax your elbows, have soft elbows before you hit a backhand. And that fixed like 6 other problems, right? I think the greatest coaches can have you focus on one thing, and by virtue of that one thing working, it fixes 5 other things that you're actually not thinking about.
That's interesting about what Jimmy Connors said about relaxing your elbow, because, tension is one of my biggest problems playing golf. Is I get into a pressure situation, or I'm not, I hit a bad shot or something like that, and I start taking a death grip on the club. And is that an issue in tennis too? Like you get into a pressure situation, or you start getting tense. Like how does that translate to golf? Do you see similarities in dealing with pressure in both those sports?
It's a great question. What I'm more interested in is how you overcame that to have the great accomplishment of winning the Charlotte Country Club member guest. How did you overcome your demons of over gripping? Because that was one for the ages, Jay.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Andy. I was going to talk to you about the 2003 U.S. Open, which is a nice accomplishment. I'm sure you're very proud of it. Yeah, but it really doesn't compare to winning you've never won the Charlotte Country Club member. And
I've never played it, but yes.
I'll tell you what though, so I'm certainly not comparing playing college basketball, playing on the pro tennis tour, and playing in Grand Slam finals, but everybody has to process their own kind of pressure. And I've never felt the same amount of pressure in the sport I grew up playing in, basketball, and played most of my adult life, early adult life, I should say. Golf doesn't compare. Like I've never been as nervous as when I stood up on a tee in a real golf tournament, and like it's almost like fear, and you deal with it and try to play it off, but that's I've never felt anything like that. What's the most nervous you've ever been in sports?
Yeah, so I think what we're getting at is like, if like my worst day in tennis wasn't going to be, it'd be disappointing, and for me it would be bad, but it's not going to be an embarrassment, right?
Right.
Like, whereas like, I compare what you're talking about. Probably the two most nervous times I've been is I got to throw out a first pitch at Yankee Stadium a while ago. And it's like, you have this thing, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to just fire one in there. And I got out there, Jay, I threw the ball at 17 miles an hour. I completely just wimped out. But also with golf, like golf's intimidating. Like you're standing on the first tee and you want to be well, and there's three guys watching you and it's silent, and you top one and they're like, oh my God, this is going to last all day. Like your mind can so quickly go to just a negative place, but that's just the difference of kind of at least feeling like you have ownership up to a certain level in something versus feeling like you're renting, right?
Well, you don't mind competing. You don't mind having a wager on the match with your friends. But I've got a question that I don't know if you've been asked this before. Would you rather play poorly and win the bet, or play the best round you've ever played and lose the bet?
I would rather play great and hand someone that I know well $10. I would rather I would rather shoot 71 and get beat and feel good and have fun and make putts and hit good shots, and then shoot 84 and have someone just like vomit beside you all day. Like, but that's also like what you say when there's not actual consequence, right? Like the consequence now is us topping one and being like embarrassed and having someone, talk crap and make fun of us, which isn't a real consequence, right? Like it's now in tennis, I would have taken the crappy day with a win forever, my entire life. But, golf, I think I don't treat it the same. I don't practice the same. I don't know that I want to get to the point where, I try to avoid my personality deficiencies as much as possible in golf. So you kind of have to take a little bit of a different tact, I think. So I'd rather lose 10 and play well.
I've been really interested. You mentioned Rafa Nadal winning the Australian Open, his 21st major, and all that. The stuff these guys are doing now is really kind of amazing. Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal. It seemed mind-boggling when I was a kid when Borg won 11 majors. That seemed like who's going to do better than that, Sampras and all that stuff. But I was also interested in Nadal being so forward with talking about golf after the match. Like he says, well, what do you do to stay in shape? I play a lot of golf. He seems like he's a diseased golfer. So if you took
diseased
golfer, isn't it crazy? Like I'm a diseased golfer. I would play every day if I could. Yeah. I would leave. I'm at a basketball game. I got a basketball game tonight. I would leave the game at halftime if they'd let me hit balls for a while. So if you took like Nadal, Federer, you name another tennis player. Who would you want to play? Who would you want to play golf with among the tennis players that you've competed with and against that play?
So Rafa is like an effective golfer. I haven't played with him, but his swing looks like super weird. It looks exactly like the way he hits a backhand, which is you don't want your club that low, but he's like a scratch or a two, and that normally doesn't happen before someone retires. So you got to think he's gonna. But I think it was last year he had finished or won something, and then all of a sudden he was playing like a qualifier event like 2 days later at like a Muni in Spain or something. So I would love to play with Rafa. I have this kind of idea in the back of my head that once everything's said and done, Andy Murray is great value. He hasn't played a ton of golf, but you see his swing and it's just something I would do terrible things for. Roger doesn't play much. Jim Courier is a great golfer and one of my close friends. Marty Fish is probably the best golfer. His swing looks like a pro. He hits it as well as a pro. If he made as many 6-footers as a pro, he might even be playing for paychecks. It seems to translate. I hear Tim Henman, the old British player, is like a phenomenal golfer. I'm trying to think. I wouldn't play with McEnroe. He's too unpredictable. He like throws. But it's cool. It seems like the natural transition is from tennis. There seems to be a lot of guys who can kind of get to a low single pretty quickly after their careers are done.
Do you like smack talk on the golf course? Talking it and listening to it?
I like it when it's done well and like not in a super obvious way. I think is I think of a friend, Sam Reeve. He's the best trash talker ever, and he never actually says it so more than one or two people can hear it. Like the yelling trash talk to me is fine. The less obvious jabs are kind of like my favorite.
So you've had some since retiring from tennis. You've devoted a fair amount of your time to your family, obviously, but you've also gotten into some interesting business ventures. And one of the all-time dreams I would have is having an interest in my own golf course, and you've got that with Sweetens Cove in Tennessee. How did that come about? And tell us about the whole venture with Sweetens Cove.
Yeah, the story's not going to make us sound very smart. I have a business partner named Mark Rivers, who his history is in kind of on the development side, but really creative, can kind of see things that aren't real obvious, is a great marketer. And we would have these things where we basically take, we'd call them field trips, where we just, talk shop, what crazy ideas, and we'd probably get together every couple of months. And he kept going back to this 9-hole golf course in I said, where is it? And he goes, it's South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. I'm like, it's 9 holes? He's like, yeah. I was like, does it have a bathroom? He's like, no. I'm like, what is that the big idea? Is that what we're doing? Are we in the 9-hole, public golf business? And he goes, I'm just telling you, you got to see it. So we go out there, and it's just golf in its purest form, but dirt parking lot, pull up to the first tee. There's a trailer involved, but I'm kind of thinking, I'm like, I get it, it's awesome, but is this what we want to do? And Rob Collins designed it, and it's just, I don't know that you get that level of architecture for that price anywhere in the country. And there were some things that needed to be fixed, and I guess from the accounting side that seemed pretty straightforward. But when we started to play it, there was this really cool thing where on the first tee, everyone would kind of have a bottle of whiskey, bourbon, and you would take a shot and then leave your bottle for whoever came behind. And then at the end of the day, everyone gathered around this and kind of shared. And it was, this really cool thing of, kind of fellowship. And I said, well, and Mark was like, maybe that's the idea. Maybe we're dumb enough to get into a business that we know nothing about. And I said, well, I've done dumber things. So we kind of call around, start put together a team of which some of the people, and then we kind of reached out to Peyton Manning. We figured if you're going to do something in Tennessee, he had spent a bunch of time in Chattanooga and still had a place there, and it was like he goes, yeah, I'll do it. I'm like, really? He was like, yeah, I'd love to be involved. And so that's probably the day where it became more real. And so you fast forward. It's been a pretty fun process. We're 2.5 years in 8 states. Esquire recently named us the #1 celebrity booze brand. So it's been a really fun venture, but we've gone slowly. We wanted to make sure we got it right. It all kind of came together when we were able to get Marianne Eves on board, who's our blender, and so she's the only person or only female in the history of Kentucky that has been designated with the status of master blender. And coincidentally, she grew up the road from Sweetens Cove, where the golf course is. So the golf course was kind of a launching ground for this crazy bourbon idea, which should work. And releasing new.
It does work. I mean,
so it's been pretty fun. It's cool that you can go to these storied golf places that we and love, and you can actually order one now. That was a cool moment.
And it's a really, not to pump your brand, but it is a really good bourbon. I mean, I've had a fair amount of it, probably too much of it, and it's really good. When you mentioned Peyton Manning, did you know him before you guys called him, or was this just a sort of an introductor? Somebody introduced you, and then it was a bit of a cold call?
No, I mean, both. I had known Peyton a while ago. Obviously his career and relevancy far outlasted mine. But we used to kind of come across each other at the ESPYs. There used to be a tennis tour event in Indianapolis in the summer, and so for 3 or 4 years we kind of made a habit of going out to dinner during that tournament. But we had largely lost contact for a while. But one of the great things about golf is it's like the Kevin Bacon rule. You're normally one phone call away from someone who is close to that person, and so another partner just like, you know what, I know I'm going to see if he'd be okay with us calling him, and so it kind of happened that simply. So we knew each other a while ago, but I don't know that we had spoken in 5, 6, 7 years. It was a kind of fascinating process where it was like, this will never work, but what's the harm in asking? And it did.
And from what I've heard, he's not just some passive investor. He is totally invested in the project and spends a lot of time involved in it. Have you met anybody quite as intense in what he does as Peyton Manning?
Yes, but they're as successful in their fields as he has been in his, right? So there's a certain type. It's like you meet people, but they have the name gravity in their given fields that Peyton does. And I don't think it's coincidental. You hear the stories where it's like, you'll read something, it's like Peyton called my liquor store personally and asked if we would carry it. I'm like, what are you doing on a Tuesday, man? Like, what? But it's been a lot of fun. We have our weekly and biweekly team calls, and he's on them. And if things aren't going well, he'll send a text out to our kind of core 5 or 6 people and say, guys, unacceptable, we're getting on a call next week. And at that point, the sheriff's not happy, and so you got to kind of figure it out. But it doesn't take long to figure it by watching him and how he kind of navigates his post-career world now. It's not hard to connect the dots to see what made him successful as a quarterback, on top of his physical talent, but just attention to detail, connecting the dots. Is there anything that can be said or done? Who do we need to talk to? Kind of the list of questions to get the result that's required. Even before you kind of get to the execution part is pretty fun to watch.
Well, you have another thing in common with Peyton Manning. In addition to being champions, you both hosted Saturday Night Live, which had to be an unbelievable experience. What do you remember from? I think that was 2003. What do you remember from hosting SNL?
It was really nerve-wracking. My favorite part of the week was, I think it's Tuesday morning. You're in the writers' room, and they have to read all of their proposed skits out loud, right? And so but some of them are like, it's funny because you're sitting there and you like Jimmy Fallon's reading something, and he'll get like a paragraph in, he's like, this is horrible, and he just throws it over his shoulder, and the next guy goes, or then one kind of gets laughs, and then they pitch in, and it's like, well, your starting point is great, what if we added this? And by the end you're just like crying laughing. And then it gets down to they'll have 40 skits, and then it gets down to like the ones they actually use. The behind the scenes part was more fascinating to me. I was just insanely nervous. And before you before you do the actual show in front of the live audience, you do the full run through, like right before, not the day before, like right before, with an hour break, and then you go and do the show. But it's full makeup, wigs, the actual show. And I was so bad in the first half hour of the run through show that I had a buddy who was with me kind of hanging out, and I got back to the dressing room, and I was like, oh my gosh. He goes, I don't know what the last half was like, but the first half was horrendous. He had gone down to the little corner store outside of Rockefeller there and gotten a 6-pack. And he goes, you need at least 2 of these before you go back and try to do that monologue again. It can't be any worse. And so, I went in, and Peyton's obviously great at that. I was less than great at that, but at least I got through and hit my lines. But it was the first one was a dumpster fire. So I'm thankful for Bud Light for getting me through the second one.
Who was a musical guest?
It was awesome. It was actually the first concert I ever saw was Dave Matthews. And it was when he had his like solo album. And so I'd actually known him a little bit, and he had come to the tennis. So it was kind of like a perfect storm. But it was a little weird because like right after the show, the next week, we had our year-end championship. So I fly from New York to Houston. I have to play Monday night. And that was for the number 1 ranking, because there were 3 guys in contention for the number 1 ranking that year. It was myself, Roger, and Juan Carlos Ferrero. And so it probably wasn't the best thing for me to do to prepare for that tournament. But we got there in the end anyways.
Sometimes people in entertainment don't pay as much attention to sports as we do. Did you get the sense that everybody knew who you were?
I think so, but it was right after the U.S. Open, and the U.S. Open's played in New York. So, when you're there, it's everyone kind of goes to the tournament. So I think so, but it was probably just based on timing. It was, I won the U.S. Open in the first week of September, and then this was November, so it was still pretty fresh. And then proximity. I'm sure not a lot of major sporting achievements, or most of them don't occur within like 2 miles of the actual studio where they do SNL. I'm pretty sure the only reason I got asked is because Lorne Michaels' kid was into tennis at the time. So it was like oh, by the way, you are also going to hit with my son during the week that you're hosting. A couple of times.
Did you do that?
Yeah, it was like, oh yeah, we're happy to have you. And I don't know, I'm not. And by the way, I'm still trying to train for the year-end championships at the end while doing 8-hour rehearsal days. Like, maybe spend an hour and a half with. I regrettably can't remember his son's name, but and you can maybe just throw in an hour and a half with Timmy. I'm like, super.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, Andy, we'll get you out of here with something we call 5 quick questions. I'll ask you 5 questions. Whatever answer you got, go ahead. The course you haven't played yet that you're dying to?
Northern Ireland. I'd love to see County Down. Royal County Down is probably my number one. I haven't played any golf. I've played very little golf overseas and none in Britain, so I'd like to go there.
The last thing you binge watched on television?
I just finished Ozark 2 nights ago. The half of the new season.
Oh, so you got through half of season 4?
Yeah, and I guess they're releasing it in two deals. So they released the first 6 or 7 episodes, and I guess we're waiting for the next release.
Oh, thank God you told me that, because I was very disappointed with the ending. I just finished it.
It felt like a weird.
Yeah, I mean, good God. And then the other one that I watched that I'm recommending to you on a podcast is The Boys. Have you seen The Boys?
No, what is it?
It's on Amazon Prime, and it's basically about these superheroes that are owned by a company. They contract them out to do crime fighting, and it is legit. You would like it.
That's funny.
All right, the golf rule that you would change if you could.
If you hit it in a fairway and it happens to go into a divot, you should be able to ask your playing partner if you can move it out of that divot, because I don't think you should get penalized for doing what you're actually trying to do.
I agree. I think it should be ground under repair, and you shouldn't have to ask anybody. You just do it.
Now, if you hit it in the rough and there's a divot, then anything goes. But in a fairway, I don't think divot should be in play. All
right. The sporting event not one you've played in, but one you've attended as a spectator that you enjoyed the most.
The best sporting event I've ever been to is my wife is heavily involved in the Special Olympics. And if you want to be inspired and see sport for what it actually can do for relationships, people, everything else, like seeing sport and having it be entertainment because you like, the team that's from your city, and it's, there's millions of dollars on the line and it's an event, that's one thing. But the Special Olympics, going to the opening ceremony of that was probably the best sporting event I've ever been to.
You're somewhat of a joker, practical joker. The best practical joke played on you, or that you've played on someone else?
This is probably illegal, but here we are. I woke up real early in a friend of mine's house. He had played a practical joke on me. I put caution tape around the outside of his property and actually spray painted bodies into his lawn one time. And then it was right as the sun was coming up. So you figure people like, the early morning walk and all that. You just kind of figured you'd fire up the rumor mill early.
All right. I lied. It's 6 questions. Last time you threw a golf club?
I haven't thrown a golf club in a long, long time. I think I'm past that. I think I used to throw golf clubs when I didn't actually play much golf, right? Like it was like a thing, but I don't really throw clubs, maybe drop a putter out of embarrassment or something. But I think my days of throwing golf clubs are over.
Did you ever toss a tennis racket when you played?
Oh my God. I actually got a call. I got a call from my sponsor. So it's really hard to get a call from your sponsor telling you basically your sponsor passing judgment on the amount of rackets you're breaking when you're like top 10 in the world. That's a hard phone call to get. I was midway through the season and I broke them sometimes in matches. I broke a lot of them in practice, and I had gone through like 50 rackets at like the midpoint of a season. I think it was like an 02 or 03. To get a call from your racket mate, because rackets, like it's probably like basketball shoes. Like Nike doesn't care how many pairs of shoes you order. Like product is the least of their worries at a certain point. To get a call from your racket manufacturer saying like, hey, you should probably break less rackets because we're concerned about the amount of product you're using, you know, while you're like top 5 in the world was a little bit of an embarrassing call.
Well, Andy, I can't thank you enough for joining us on our Five Clubs platform for this conversation. And I got to tell you, you know, with all you've accomplished in tennis, outside of tennis, the one thing that always sticks out to me about Andy Roddick is if you didn't know you were all this, you'd never know by hanging out with you, because you are as normal a guy in the best possible way that I could possibly imagine. So I can't thank you enough. I'm not going to pepper you with questions on the golf course next time we play, but I can't tell you how much we appreciate having you.
Appreciate you, Jay. Thanks a lot. Let's play soon.
Let's do that. See you, brother.
Bye-bye.
Well, we want to again thank Andy Roddick for joining us on this Five Clubs conversation, and we hope you enjoyed it. And we hope you'll join us next time on Five Clubs when we meet again.